You're listening to the Falconry Podcast with Ben Woodruff. Hey everyone, Ben Woodruff here with John Griggs.
Hello again.
And we are here today talking about a species we both love dearly and have flown extensively, the Cooper's hawk, also known as the feathered rattlesnake. And I love that terminology. I first read it in Mike McDermott's book, The Imprint, Accipiter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what they are. They're feathered rattlesnakes.
They strike that quick. They really do.
They really are.
They can get you. You know, the most neat thing about accipiters in comparison to when handling, all right, is how incredibly fast that they are. Like, I have
other dimension speed.
Yeah. Like, I've had plenty of different birds try to grab me, you know, when you've got a newly trapped bird or something, or try to bite you, but never
you see it coming.
Yeah, you see it coming. You're able to get out of the way. Of course, you know, when I was, you know, a little less experienced, you'd get hit a few times, but now I'm like, I was quite proud of myself. No bird is going to grab me until I got a Cooper's hawk.
Grabbing the
now
face.
They're fast.
Grabbing the face.
Oh, they're just quick.
They really are. So if you're new to this, if you're like looking into falconry and you're like, what's a Cooper's hawk? So to give you a little background, in kind of traditional falconry among the hawks, there's sort of two groups. There's the Buteos or the soaring hawks. That's a bird like a red-tailed hawk is a perfect, you know, exemplary, you know, fine specimen to say for the Buteos. And they're usually rodent hunters just sitting in the open. And then there's the family that's the true hawks, or the Accipiters. And they typically live in forests. They have long tails, short rounded wings, and this group of raptors is really kind of special. And they are fast, they are flashy, they are nimble, and I don't totally like this example, but if you think of an eagle as a lion, and maybe same thing. If you think of a Buteo like a red tail as a lion, think of your Accipiters as your leopards and your cheetahs. Powerful killers, but much more nimble. And in America, we've got three of them. A little one, a medium one, and a big one. It's the three bears. The biggest is the northern goshawk. The medium one is the Cooper's hawk, and the smallest is the sharpshin. And these three raptors...
If the middle bear had potential to be freaking crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
Not all
of them. And what we kind of want to go over in this is talking about just kind of some of their training, some of their attributes, good and bad, because there's a lot of ways you can look at things. Anytime you have bad behavior, which even the term bad is subjective, but if you have undesirable behavior being expressed in a raptor, the first thing I gotta say is, what are you doing? What are you doing that could be causing and eliciting this expression of undesirable behavior? But on the other hand, if we're honest and open-minded, we also have to say, you know what, there's certain traits that are common enough to be worth mentioning that, yeah, this is common in the species. You know, and so this is kind of funny, though. This species, it's a medium-sized bird, and here's what's funny about it. This is my absolute favorite raptor to fly. I don't have one. We'll get into kind of the how and why, but this is my favorite hawk to fly. Now, John here, when we met, he is the biggest long-winger lover. He is a falcon lover, and a falcon. We talk for hours about
falcons. Peregrine falcon. When I get a peregrine, hey, you know, Ben, someday when I get a peregrine.
Someday. It's like, you can't say the word peregrine falcon in the presence of John without putting your hand over your heart and looking at the sky longingly. And
I thought I was the one that was doing that.
It's protocol. But when we, over the years, it's been interesting to watch your journey because you moved to Arizona, and what made sense, you were trapping wild harrises and hunting them. It made sense. And then back in Utah, because of job situations, life situations, kids, you found that actually hunting with the Cooper's hawk was a lot of bang for your buck.
I could stay close.
Mm-hmm. A lot of game availability, too. It's a lot easier to find a slip for a Cooper's hawk if you live in the Salt Lake Valley than it is to go find a duck or a pheasant or a grouse for a peregrine.
Yeah, because the slips are literally everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and so are Cooper's hawks in the wild, and so that's
true.
Kind of neat. So if you're new, there's normally sort of 3 scenarios that a person, a falconer, may acquire a Cooper's hawk, typically. There are the imprints, which is where you take a baby, and of course you have to know the laws of your area and what rank in falconry you are allowed to pull at certain ages, right? But an imprint is raised from a baby. A passage bird is a bird that has no parental care whatsoever now. It has left its parents' care. It still has first-year plumage. It is still inexperienced, but it is an independent hunting bird. And then there's something in between called the family bird, and we'll get into all of those quick. But what I can't remember what was your first coops, John?
A family bird.
It was a family bird.
Oh yeah. We caught it. Parents were still present. In fact, I think you and I both saw the parents carrying a sparrow drop it. We got to see the whole show. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was the one with the neighborhood where the people we asked and they're like, yeah, we got these birds here. You can.
We were out trapping, and we were trying to, because when it comes to trapping, there's a lot of concerns about property.
Yes.
You don't want to violate any property. So what we had done is we had put our BC in right next to the gutter in the road, because that's public property. Technically, that is a place you can legally trap. There was a Cooper's hawk overhead. Excuse me. And this woman came by, and we knew that she was going to see the trap, and we're like, okay, we'll go and get it. We'll explain what we're doing. Normal thing, Try to explain yourself. Usually, people are totally cool once you've
just be honest and diplomatic.
Yeah. Excuse me again. And she's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be trapping out here. Come into my backyard."
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, "All right, come into her backyard." And I was with Joseph,
right?
Meat Man.
Yeah,
awesome guy. So we get back there, and lo and behold, she's got 2 of these little tubs full of water, and there are 3 Cooper's hawks sitting there. And she just walks up to him and says, "Oh, hi, birds and everything." And we're like, "Oh, don't scare him." That's what we're thinking, but we didn't say anything. She goes back in, and we literally can put this trap right next to these birds because they're just used to coming in and getting drinks here. It was a really neat experience. I immediately called you, of course.
Yeah.
And you came out with us the next morning, and we caught some.
I do remember that nest. Did you guys find the actual nest or just the grow? You guys found the actual nest.
Then that winter I went back and was able to locate it in the tree, and it was actually active this year as well.
Yeah, they're so cool. Let's talk a little bit about let's give people an idea about the species, and then let's go into family bird or imprint or passage and why that's good. This is a strange-sized hawk. Most parts of the world will have a native sparrowhawk of their area, and that a sparrowhawk is a group of birds of accipiters that are, they're hunting the small little Twinkie birds, we kind of call them, right? And we don't have one. We have 2. We have Cooper's hawks and we have sharp-shinned hawks, and one's a little bigger, one's a little smaller, and so
which actually cross over in size. The female Sharpies are as big as the male Coopers.
Exactly.
In some respects.
Yeah.
It depends. There's a range, of course. Mm-hmm. But Ben, what about the American kestrel? Isn't that the American sparrowhawk?
Oh, I got to tell you.
That
drives me so
nerves
nuts.
Here.
And any old timers who may be listening to this, no disrespect. It's interesting because some of our greatest falconers in this country, who are alive and kicking and flying hard still, grew up in this other era where peregrines were called duck hawks, merlins were called pigeon hawks, northern harriers were called marsh hawks, and kestrels, which are falcons, were called sparrow hawks. Oh, look at that sparrowhawk, boy. And it was always the strangest thing to see, oh, well, the books, according to taxonomy, say that the kestrel is a falcon. Why are you calling it a sparrowhawk? Well, that's what I grew up with, boys. And it's still the same thing today.
Sparrows, right?
Yeah. And it's always the same thing. We all have our slip-ups, and it's like, you know what? To my grave, I will call Harris's hawks Harris hawks. And a person could be like, the appropriate common name is Harris's hawk. Yep, yeah, it is. I don't care. I can say Parabuteo unicinctus. That's the scientific name that we all agree on. So if I drop an S from Harris's and say Harris, okay, fine, whatever. So maybe I shouldn't give any flack for any old-timers saying sparrowhawk. I'll tell you what bugs me, though. This drove me nuts. Little nerdy Ben Woodruff, as a teenager, we went to Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. And they had all these different displays, about the native peoples who live there, but also about the wildlife. And they had different taxidermied birds, including a kestrel. And right in there it said, American Sparrowhawk. And I'm like, and I went and talked to one of the rangers. And I'm like, that's actually kind of an antiquated term. Like, this is like 16, 17-year-old Ben Woodruff. Using antiquated term, Mr. Ranger. It's actually an American kestrel, Falcos bavarius. And he's like, son, I think the National Park Services knows what they're talking about. And just like scoffed at me. And I remember being all miffed about that. It's like such a bird nerd thing to do. Excuse me, your sign is wrong. It's just like, come on.
I'm sighing because I've done that before.
Okay, wait.
17-year-old John would have done the same thing. I'm an admitted nerd. I'm sorry.
I got to tell you, probably my most embarrassing version of one of those. I know this isn't Cooper's Hawks, but I gotta say this. I was younger. I was 12, 13 years old. My parents hauled us to Disneyland, and we stayed in the campground in a tent trailer behind the back lot of Disneyland. And I woke up and I started hearing a bald eagle. And I'm like, oh my gosh, a bald eagle. Oh, wow. And I'm like, and I kind of tried to triangulate and figure out where it was. And it's like, this back forest that led to the employee entrance of Disneyland back then, it seemed to be coming from there. So I'm like, I want to go find this, but in case any Disney people stop me, I better look official. So I put on this stupid Utah bird watching baseball hat, my binoculars around my neck, and my field guide, and I started walking down the road, and this guard that looked like Mr. McFeely from Mr. Rogers is like, can we help you, son? And I'm like, yes, I'm an ornithologist from Utah, and I've been hearing a breeding age bald eagle, most likely a female. I didn't know any of that. It was just bald eagle. And I'd like to go see if it has a nest nearby. And they're like, well, let's check, son. And so he gets on his radio and he's talking to somebody. And he's like, we have an honored guest here who wants to see an eagle, blah, blah. Okay, I'll tell him. Turns out it was a recording on the Mark Twain boat ride. It was an animatronic bald eagle with a call playing. And I'm like, okay, I'll go back to my campground, sir. It's just like, that was probably my nerdiest bird nerd moment. It's just...
But Ben, I mean, don't all bald eagles make red tail noises? I thought that's what it was.
If you watch movies, man... I was watching that Mountain Man show, like the real Mountain Men series. I was watching that the other night, and... every bird they showed, there's a turkey vulture. Meow, they play a red tail noise. There's a bald eagle. Meow, there's a red tail noise. There's a golden eagle. Meow, it's a red tail noise. I don't know why it is, but that's how it always goes. Like that and petting a bird. If you have a falconer depicted on a movie, like some medieval show, the second they're on screen, they are nonstop petting the bird's chest. Just pet, 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 pet. And the bird is screaming nonstop, even though the bird's mouth isn't open.
Just at nothing. They're just vocalizing for the fun of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it was an imprint.
Okay, well, ADD moment. I get sidetracked. I always do. Back to the Cooper's Hawks. we don't normally say that you're going to have a lot of success with a bird if you hunt a bird native to your area on prey native to your area that species would normally hunt on its own without human encouragement. And so for me,
that's the easiest way to enter.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's a given. This is what they should have been doing already. And so for me, like, Cooper's hawks can hunt some larger prey, but I love to hunt quail. That's my favorite thing to hunt with them is quail.
Those are a challenge.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Sparrows, starlings, but you can go larger. You can hunt partridge.
Doves. Ringnecks, man.
Yeah.
But you flew Cooper's hawks before the ringnecks were really invaded this area, because it was funny because I moved down to Arizona and I don't remember even seeing ringnecks. It was mourning doves that we saw here.
Yeah.
And then when I came back and moved back down to the Salt Lake Valley, all of a sudden I'm seeing virtually no mourning doves and all ringnecks.
Ringnecks everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. So I actually tried to hunt ringnecks with my Coopers because they were prevalent, but they're tough to catch.
They are. They're a challenge. They're a worthy quarry. The Cooper's hawks, what's really nice about them, they're available. You can find them in just about anywhere, if you're looking to find a nest. And there's always prey available. They're insanely fast and agile. They can get up and go. That's one of the fun things is if they miss, they get back up and they're back in the game chasing even after they totally and completely missed. Which that's not something you see with something like a kestrel or a red tail normally. Normally if they fully commit and miss, they're like, okay, well, pick me up, give me another slip.
They're not afraid at all of recommitting into a bush or crashing bushes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most interesting flights I had with Ziggs was he would buzz a bush and then all the sparrows would go into it, and then he would go up and back into the bush and out of the bush and back into the bush and out of the bush and back into the bush, and it was just crazy because every time he'd go in, punching in with force like that. The sound that you hear when a red tail or a Harris hawk. Yeah, I say Harris hawk too.
Yeah.
I know it's the other way around.
Take that, people who are descriptively accurate.
To each their own. I got no problem if you want to say it the other way. But
if you want to say we're wrong, you're right. We are wrong.
You're right.
Oh well, what are you gonna do?
So that sound you hear, that when they hit the bushes, you hear that, but it's just they pop out the other side, they go back in, and it's just really exciting, really energetic,
slam.
And fast,
and it's at a speed that we can't fully process. It's like if you play them in slow motion, it's like you're watching a Harris or a red-tailed hawk at regular speed. They're so fast and agile and successful. That's the other thing we haven't mentioned. Yeah. It's like you're just gonna okay. If you're hunting an accipiter properly, proper weight, and properly entered on quarry, you're just going to you could hunt all day, every day, and never stop catching quarry. And that is a plus and a minus, because in my opinion, it's not wise to fly a Cooper's hawk if you're going to fly anything else. You better just put all your effort into that one bird.
Agreed. Here's the thing. You can fly a red tail or a Harris 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even weekends. Maybe you can pull off the weekend bird.
Mm-hmm.
A Cooper's hawk is never a weekend bird. I don't see any way you could do it. I would hunt mine 6 days a week, and he'd still be going crazy every single day, right about hunting time. Oh yeah, completely spastic at hunting time because they want to get out there and do it, and it's just this fire inside them, it seems to me anyway. That's the way that I interpret it.
It's kind of like a weasel. If you've ever, I know a lot of people haven't worked with actual weasels, but if you see them in the wild or ever work with them or in a zoo setting or rehab, it's like they need to kill nonstop. It's wired into them. And we could speculate on reasons from the fact that they have a high metabolism. You don't know where your next meal is. You better kill. But they're and that translates again into high success. So everything
I feel like we need Joe on this podcast for talking weasels and minks.
It's like start talking about the mink, But they just the follow through. It's like, so everything we've said, you've got a bird readily available almost everywhere in the United States. Easy to catch, even easier to pull as baby, and extremely high success rate, fast, agile. They hunt prey species that are readily available literally everywhere. So why isn't everybody flying them? For very good reasons. Like, I value the state of my face. I would like it to not look like hamburger.
Well, and I think that we can preface this with, we are not going to, we're not going to spread the misinformation that all Cooper's Hawks are face grabbers, or that all Cooper's Hawks have problems, and you shouldn't fly Cooper's Hawks because they have aggression issues.
Correct.
What we are going to talk about more or focus on is the fact that Cooper's Hawks are very, what's the word? They are unforgiving.
Yes, that's perfect. They're high maintenance, many other birds are, but they are unforgiving. If you screw up, they will hold a grudge for...
And they'll punish you for it.
Yes.
I mean,
it might
they really
be weeks, months, or forever.
And it may only take a few times of doing the wrong thing, and if you don't read the signs that you were doing something that they didn't like, the next time they may just let you know.
Yeah. And it could be in a very violent way, or it could be in a very terrified way where the bird itself is just wanting to carry or run off. And and these things can be worked through, but this is why this is not a beginner's bird. Okay, a lot of people give me crap on all these videos, and you're welcome to. It's okay, I get it. My opinions are my opinions. My experiences are my experiences. But I will simultaneously say this is my favorite bird to fly, and simultaneously say I believe, personally, that it is the hardest hawk to train and fly properly. I'm not saying that any steps are unusually difficult, but the time commitment and the attention to detail is easy to slip up on, and if you do, you will regret it. People fly, everybody, John and I included, flying other species, we make mistakes, and often it's easy to get lazy or sloppy and not realize you're making minor mistakes, and your bird forgives or rolls with it. It's like, and you don't even notice it. You will with a Cooper's Hawk, and it will be aggressive or vocal or do things. And so John, I do appreciate you saying that. Hey, even though we're joking, it's not that Cooper's Hawks are bad birds. And we don't want to sound that we're just saying they're face-grabbing birds. That's the joke. But the reality is, if you put the time and effort, and if you train them correctly, you will have a successful, wonderful bird. But just be prepared to fly every day, and not just for one kill. You got to keep flying and hunting and flying and hunting, or admit that you can't and not have a Cooper's Hawk. Get another species.
Yeah, it's better to fly something else than to try to pull off the 2 or 3 days a week flying with a Cooper's Hawk. It's just they have this energy level about them, and if they don't have the ability to release that energy, it turns itself into other problems, and
it manifests in other unexpected ways.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to create any kind of situation where the bird shows fear in any way, because that's going to result in kind of the same thing. I mean, they only have a few ways of feeling like they can defend themselves, and they usually result in hurting you.
Mm-hmm. And this is a podcast where you have two passionate falconers shooting the breeze, talking about a bird we've both flown and both love. So this is not some the end all. Trustees on how to fly a Cooper's Hawk. So we're not getting into all the problems and fixing techniques, but there's one principle that I will say. No matter what problem you are facing with a Cooper's Hawk that's having issues, one thing that will guaranteed improve, if not fix the situation, is to hunt it more.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, I will be the first person to tell you that I am not an expert on Cooper's Hawks. I'm not an expert on Accipiters. I've had some mild success with a couple of Cooper's Hawks.
You've had some great success. My name's John, and I'm Mr. Right. Humble. You've had some great success, and you've had some struggles.
Yeah, I've made some mistakes, and the good thing is that I kind of understand where I made the mistakes, and I'm eager to get another one sometime and try again on it. You know, my personal goal right now is to try a Sharpie instead, but I have no doubt in the world that I will definitely come back to flying a Cooper's Hawk again because they are a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are a blast. I would say, kind of with what you said there, if you have not ever flown an Accipiter and you are thinking about it, and if I didn't know your situation, didn't know where you lived, I would say get a Sharpie. Maybe if you had more details, I'd say otherwise. Get a Sharpie. Sharpies are the most forgiving of the three. Again, we're talking from experience, but we're just sharing opinions. But my experience,
and this is general, because they're even in Cooper's Hawks and Sharpies and Goshawks, Accipiters in general. The temperament of these birds differs even by region.
Yes.
So Western Cooper's Hawks have a different temperament than Eastern Cooper's Hawks, as well as a different look to them. So
different size too.
Yeah, size. Oh, they're way bigger in the East. So
my first Cooper's Hawk was named Jackie Chan because I thought it was a male because I'd only been talking to Eastern Falconers and seeing pictures of their Coopers. Nope, turned out to be a female. Totally threw me.
Yeah, my first Cooper's Hawk, his name was Zeke, and he flew at 226 grams, which was about 2 grams too heavy. That was what he flew on the day I lost him.
Yeah, they're not big out here in the West, which is funny because it seems like in the West a lot of attitudes and big sky country and buffalo and grizzly bears, and yet a lot of our raptors are smaller than our red tails are smaller out here in Utah than the eastern ones, and it's just a lot of them are that way. But the Cooper's really is just like raw falconry, raw genuine. It's just getting out and hunting. It's not a bird that you can sit on. It doesn't work. It's this ball of energy that needs to be directed at something. Needs to be, like if you have a falcon, maybe you're like, well, I go hunting 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe the rest of the time I get out and have it stoop to a lure and do some great lure exercising. Can't do that with a Cooper's Hawk. I mean, I know if somebody's going to leave a message and be like, well, I do, and I have some amazing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, fine.
There's exceptions to everything.
There's always exceptions, yeah. But
I mean, I've ever since I started falconry, anytime I do it, I hunt 5 or 6 days a week just because that's why I'm into falconry. So the Cooper's Hawk seem to make sense to me in that regard. I do the same thing with kestrels.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that just that activity level and that expenditure of that energy helps their home life.
Yeah.
Because even if I've just missed a single hunting day, you can tell by the way that the Cooper's Hawk behaves. And, I've even tried things changing up the perch scenario so that there was less distractions and less ways to calm them down, but really just the biggest antidote, the most powerful medicine to having a calm, collected Cooper's Hawk is flying it, hunting it.
Yeah.
It's what they want to do.
Actually get out there and pursue game. And again, you just have to be detail oriented. And I recommend it's wise to find somebody, if you can, who has flown them, to have them think of fishing, okay? And you could say that flying an Accipiter, especially Cooper's Hawk, is like the fly tying fly fisherman. That it's like, okay, I'm gonna put my net in the stream and see what's flowing downstream. Okay, and I'm gonna change which fly I use accordingly.
That's my brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's my brother.
Yeah,
totally detail oriented, and he does exactly that. He'll see the kind of flies that are floating, buzzing around the surface, and he'll literally just grab his little kit and tie a fly there.
And that's what you have to do with the Coopers, is watch their attitude, watch their behavior, watch the nuances of their posture with incredible detail, and hopefully with the tutelage and help and advice of somebody who's already flown one, who tells you, hey, if they're like, because, okay, I call them switches. Cooper's Hawks have these switches, and they're on or they're off. And if just a subtle posture will be like, okay, this bird, if you approach, it wants to kill you. And the second it moves its wings or its feet just slightly different, you're like, oh, the switch is now
Changes
off.
Posture.
Yeah. You could pick the bird up with your bare hand now and have no problem. And it's like, it's not calming down. It's like a switch. And
about you're talking about, and this is one reason why oftentimes very experienced falconers, or at least people who study under experienced falconers, have an advantage here. But a very prominent falconer, at least in recent years, who was extremely successful with a goshawk, I won't name drop, but you guys might know who it is, actually argued this point and said that many of the best Cooper's hawks that he'd seen were actually from first-year generals studying under people who understood Cooper's hawks. Because think about it this way. So you've got the knowledge. So let's just put this in as an example. My wife is an apprentice under Ben. And if she flew one in her general year, she had been successful as an apprentice, she would have someone teaching her how to do it that knew Cooper's hawks, understood how they worked, and could also direct her to study the right information. Like McDermott's books, those are really good. Not a Bible, but they have great information in them.
Yeah.
But think about it in this way, and in a way, this wasn't me. Let's keep thinking of the first year general. They don't have any of the bad habits, or maybe fewer of them, that many falconers create. Yeah, because your bird is the birds you're flying are very forgiving. You develop these habits that don't really affect you, don't cause any problems, so they're not considered bad habits with your Buteo or your longwing. But then you pick up this Cooper's hawk, and it's a completely different animal. It's a completely different mindset from longwings or Buteos. Though I've noticed that all of them have those switches. You just don't really have to watch for them as much, right? So I can understand why this particular falconer says that these younger falconers tend to do well with these things. Because, maybe it's because they don't have any of those bad habits.
That you would pick up having flown a whole bunch of other birds beforehand.
But at the same time, the reason why... So the Cooper's hawk's reputation is not undeserved completely, okay? Lots of first-year generals see these Cooper's hawks, and they are amazing flyers, and they're really fast, and they can be explosively successful. So they're like, well, of course that's what I want to fly. I don't want to fly this slow redtail or this little tiny kestrel, anymore, or whatever. And they get this bird that's dynamic and amazing, but then they also find out that this bird can very easily become absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
And that this bird will hurt you when you screw up. Wow, what a difference.
And hold that grudge. And you might not even know what it is you did if you don't have somebody, kind of giving you some advice on them and saying, well, did you look over here? Like, okay. And it can be a little thing, too, that you wouldn't even notice, again, like we've said, on another bird. And that's really the big problem, is that other birds will let you unknowingly make mistakes.
I've known redtail guys that have fed almost every single meal ends up on their glove. You do that with a Cooper's, and I'm sure that there'll be somebody that's like, I've fed my Cooper's on my glove every day of its life. It's also an imprint, or whatever, right? All right, there are exceptions, okay? But for the majority... most of the Cooper's hawks that I've seen that are fed on the glove all the time, they will be incredibly aggressive to the glove. I mean, they will hit the glove. Because
that glove is a live kill in their mind that they are mantling over, and they don't think of it as your arm. In that moment, they're having this stimulus response, and the glove is a kill, and you are moving in on their territory. Well, you can't step away from your own arm.
Yeah.
So now you got a problem.
And then if you're one of the people who also, because a lot of people like to call their birds with the glove right in front of their face, and I'm not saying that that's a mistake, and I'm not someone who's going to be able to really, I don't consider myself to be one of those people that could tell people that this is the right way to do it or not. But if you think about it, and a very smart person who's flown many Cooper's hawks, a good friend of mine from Arizona, saw me when I was working with my first Cooper's hawk, and I was working with it on the ground, and he's like, one thing you want to pay attention to, try to never put your face on the other side of the food.
Yes.
And because he says, if that bird, even if the bird is on the lure, which it was at the time, right? And he said, even if the bird is on the lure, what he's seeing is he's looking down at his feet and he's seeing food, and he's looking up and he's seeing your face. Mm-hmm. And that creates an association. And I can understand, because I've seen video, and I've seen a couple times in person, where guy calls his Cooper's hawk to his fist, and doesn't have any meat on the fist, or he has a teeny tidbit. Bird eats the tidbit, or hits the glove with power, and then goes face glove, face glove, face glove, just grabbing. Yeah. And that's got to be, I mean, from what I can read, that's what's happening. Mm. Is this, where's the food, where's the food, where's the food, right? Mm-hmm. This face means food, this glove means food, going back and forth, crazy time. Yeah. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, you have to be very careful and conscientious of everything you do, and you have to. And again, this is doctrine of Ben. So again, there's many different approaches to accipiters, but the doctrine of Ben is you cannot eliminate the aggression within an accipiter. You can only direct it if you're doing it correctly. Even the kindest accipiter, we'll talk about family birds here in a minute. The kindest family bird still has within it insane, predatory, white knuckle aggression, and you can't get rid of it. I promise you. You can direct it at Quarry. You can direct it at your face, at your glove, at the lure, at your leg, at the dog. You know, it's like, you can either correctly or incorrectly direct it, and you need to make sure that you are not accidentally, incorrectly directing that bird's aggression at something you don't want it directed at. And so if you see a really well-behaved Cooper's hawk, you're like, oh, look, it's got great manners and it's a great hunter. Yeah, it's not that it doesn't have aggression. It's that the aggression is being channeled and directed where it should be.
You know, and you remember when you suggested, so I'll give a little bit of background here. I had taken a decent break from falconry because I had been just raising my kids, and I was coming back, and Ben's like, you're living here in the city, you should fly Cooper's hawk. Mm-hmm. And I was apprehensive because the last view that I had got of a real Cooper's hawk was in Arizona, and the bird had just caught a quail. Mm. The falconer approached, and the bird left a live quail to attack his boot, climb his pant leg, and grab him in the chest. So I'm sitting here thinking, this is what I have in front of me. But no, I mean, I got educated and learned the way to do it. And even with a family bird, so even my first bird, Zeke, which, by the way, was one of the sweetest birds I've ever flown. He was very nice, very kind, very gentle.
Yeah, it was a good bird.
If I didn't pay attention to the switches, like if I didn't pay attention to what his frame of mind was as I approached, as I moved my hand, he would still, I got footed a couple times by him. But with him, he wasn't, because he wasn't a super aggressive bird, he never like grabbed and bound to me.
You were hunting him. You were hunting him constantly.
Every day.
Yeah, so for the most part, all that aggression was being directed at Quarry.
Yeah, 6 or 7 days a week I hunted him, and he was an amazing bird. And, he would just kind of put a foot on me like, bam, I don't want you to do that. Or he would keck at me. And so I was learning these switches that they have where I would watch what his body language was telling me. So sometimes, when I could see that body language was negative, I'd just kind of sit down next to him. And wait for it to pass, and as soon as I saw it change, then I could move on to whatever the next step was and what we were doing, whether it was making in, whether it was getting him hooked in, whether it was trading him or whatever.
Yeah, and he was a good bird. You did great with him. That's what's so fun is when you see a Cooper's hawk flown right. I wish there was a way to drop the intensity a little so that more people could fly them, but that's not how it is, and so we just have to be honest.
I mean, that's the neatest thing about them is that they're just a great size, especially if you're urban hawking. I mean, what a perfect bird. Sharpie, honestly, would be just as good, well, nearly as good, because there's a level of prey that you can take with a Cooper still, but you can't take with a Sharpie. But that doesn't always apply the other direction. Like Cooper's hawks, they can take all of the little brown jobs, the little Twinkies.
Little tiny birds, yeah.
Yeah, they can take all the tiny birds that the Sharpies can do, but they can also get up into the... I mean, I know that Sharpies can do quail and they can do dove, but they don't do them quite as well as the Coopers because of the Cooper's foot size and their weight,
They're
and
just
being
that
able
more
to easily
mass.
overpower them. And, you know, and even Coopers can take small ducks and small rabbits.
I've gotten
particularly
golden
females.
eyes and cinnamon teals with them and hen pheasants.
Obviously, it wouldn't be entirely smart to say do ducks an entire year because they're quite strong, and Coopers are notorious for breaking tail feathers. They
are.
They have this enormous train, and they are completely fearless.
And they're reckless. They just dive in.
Yeah, especially when it's almost like they have this switch where they know that there's, I don't know, maybe they realize that there's not as much of a threat, you know, like a wild one will. You know, they have to.
Well, and a wild one's
maybe
going
I'm
for
wrong
the
on
easiest
this,
meal.
Yeah.
You know.
But in Falconry, they just seem to have no fear whatsoever. Reckless abandon.
Mm-hmm. And I've got a friend in California. I don't know. We're new to podcasting, so it's like, okay, could you say somebody's name? Can you not without asking them ahead of time? So, but I've got a very seasoned falconer friend in California in the high desert, and every few years he'll get a Cooper's hawk, and he will fly them on birds most of the season, and then in the late season he'll start to hunt them on cottontails, and the last week or two before he puts them up for the molt, he hunts jackrabbits. They always catch them, and of course they can't fully subdue them, and he's got to rush in and subdue the rabbit, and they bust all their tail feathers completely, and he doesn't care because it's like, this bird is just barely starting to molt, so it doesn't matter. It's going to get a whole new set of feathers in the coming weeks, and it's just going to be fat and happy and not hunting through the molt. So it's like you've got a bird that can tackle jackrabbits barely, recklessly, but can hunt sparrows. That's a bird that is too big to be little and too little to be big.
Yep.
You know, our other two accipiters, a goshawk is a big bird. A sharpshin is microhawking. A Cooper's hawk, it's such a fun size because, you know, which is it? Is that big or is it little? I don't know.
You could probably do, what are they called? Oh, man, chuckers.
Yes.
With a Cooper's hawk.
I did one year in an area when they had just planted a bunch at the base of the mountain out there by, out in Eagle Mountain, that Saratoga Springs Eagle Mountain area. Okay. I did 1 year. There was a bunch down low where I was hunting around. I'm like, there's a bunch of chuckers. And I did chuckers with Coopers, and they had no problem with it. You know, they get wing-whapped a little, but, you know.
That would be about the biggest size that I would suspect that, at least for Western Coopers.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, again, Western, Eastern Coopers, big difference. So if you're in the East and you're going, whatever, I take ducks every day with my Coopers, or whatever.
Mighty and powerful Eastern Cooper's hawks.
Yeah, chuckers are probably about the biggest thing that I would try to take, especially with a male Cooper's hawk. They could probably hold on, but females would be way better.
Yeah, females would be the way to go, probably.
Yeah.
And you know, every bird's different. There's I've never had a female merlin. Like, this is my thing. I'm like, they were called pigeon hawks. They hunted them on pigeons and larks in medieval times. If I have a female merlin, I will at some point in the season intentionally hunt pigeons. And I usually do it hedgehawking style. And most of them, you know, you run over and they've got, you know, both feet on the bird and they're just like, you know, the pigeons flopping. But my smallest female I ever had was this little black suclei, Jessica. I don't know if you remember her.
I do.
And she would, no matter what, every pigeon she caught, I'd run up to her. She would have 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot around the pigeon's neck, and the pigeon would have a broken neck or a bleeding neck and couldn't move. She was gripping it so hard with 1 foot. She just knew how to do it.
And so Jessica, she was the one that we caught at a farm, and it was late in the season. It was completely wet. There was mud everywhere.
Yeah.
And that was the one
dairy farm.
Yep, and I slipped in the mud and ended up with mud all over my pants. I remember Jessica.
So this is interesting too. She was a tough cookie. So here's what happened. I flew her for a season, 2 seasons, and she got grabbed by a bird, made it through, healed up, and made sure she was still hunting, and I ended up setting her free. I found her 3 years later. I retrapped her, And she had the band and the documentation. And so it's like, oh, this is a bird that I had flown 3 years earlier. And so she retrained up really quick, and I flew her in a cast with another Merlin. And
That's awesome.
It's like, it's cool to fly a bird for a couple seasons, have it go wild for 3 years, and then be flying it again. It's kind of a cool situation. So
I remember you saying that you had trapped her again.
Yeah.
And that is really neat. She was a neat bird. I
think I trapped her back the year you had Spud.
Yes, we have a picture of a Columbaris Merlin Spud, who was a 335-gram male prairie falcon.
Tiny little thing.
That I should have kept. I should have kept him and hunted starlings with him. But anyway, mistakes were made. I wanted to fly a bigger bird, and I shouldn't have. But yeah, we have that picture of that with a Columbaris, this tiny little prairie, and then Jessica right next to them on your truck perch.
And we had them in a row, so because your prairie was so little, and because of that forced perspective, it just was head bigger, head bigger, head bigger, head bigger, and the prairie looked like it was another Merlin.
I'm totally gonna find that picture. So
we gotta find that, because that one was so cool. I'll have to look it up too. That's in the Winterfest files, I think.
Yes. Yeah. I know you have it because I probably sniped it off of your Facebook.
I'm gonna look it up while we're talking. I'm gonna look it up. But let's talk about passage birds, imprints, and then family birds. The glorious family bird.
This is a good subject because in the past 2 years I've actually flown all three of those. My first bird was a family bird, and it was great, wonderful. The only reason that I am not still flying that bird right now is that we got separated. We couldn't find each other, and I wasn't running telemetry. I looked for 2 weeks and finally gave up. Yeah. He was spotted, though, about 30 miles away. But yeah, it's and then I flew a passage bird that was a late September passage. And it was interesting because you could definitely tell right away that he was a little bit more aggressive, that when you got into that situation where they didn't like what you were doing, he had spent, I guess, even that period of time where they have to start really fighting with their siblings to get that food from mom and dad. As that time goes on and they start getting hungrier and hungrier, I can imagine that the aggression probably gets worse, right?
Yeah.
So,
and then it drops off once they leave, but it's still built in there. They understand, hey, everybody's a potential enemy, including your own siblings or your parents, even once you leave the nest.
And I think that, and this is just a theory, that might be some of the source of, that additional aggression with even an early passage bird, is that, there was that realization that everyone is a competitor, right? And so I definitely noticed it with him, but just by keeping on with the same process, he became a really awesome bird too. He was never as nice as Zeke was.
Yeah.
And then the imprint, it's easy to make teeny little mistakes and get punished by them. Then you have to go into troubleshooting mode and try to figure out, okay, so we've got this behavior. I don't like this behavior. How do I work this behavior out of them? And this is where two things come in. First and foremost, any documentation like McDermott's books, for example, are good for troubleshooting, particularly except during behavioral problems. It's good just to run through the troubleshooting. Okay, well, what causes this problem in most birds? So it's nice how he has it broken down with, okay, so 70% of the time it was hooding, 20% of the time it was something else or whatever. Because then you can drill down to the things that maybe you did wrong, right?
And it's not always intuitive. It could be
not always.
Yeah, it could be some strange thing you're doing earlier in the day, and it manifests in a strange way with aggression later on, and you don't see the connection. So yeah, troubleshooting, like you're saying, that's the key.
And this is where I'm going to say this with some apprehension, because as all of us know, if you're a falconer and you've been around falconry for very long, you ask 20 falconers their opinion, you're going to get 35 different opinions. It's startling sometimes, but everybody has their own methodology for this. So just remember that if you're in the situation where you've got a Cooper sock and it has an issue, that when you ask people what they did, you're going to get a lot of different answers, and not all of them are good. But some are. Many are, I would say. And so it's a good idea to look at things logically, look at things from as high a level as you can, to try to kind of drill down on what it is. And that's where it came down to, for me, is that I am surrounded by people who know more than I do, and I utilize that.
And and you have to, since we're on that subject, this isn't a book review, but Mike McDermott wrote the Imprint Accipiter, and then the Imprint Accipiter 2, and Accipitrine Behavioral Problems. These are 3 great books. My personal opinion is that they are very worth having. My personal opinion on the Imprint Accipiter is read it, but don't view it as doctrine. If you need to tweak a few things in your way of raising a bird, do it. But get those fundamentals. But Accipitrine Behavioral Problems not only gives a lot of good answers, but that book also, more importantly, teaches you how to think and how to, I need to have a troubleshooting mindset instead of just, this bird's aggressive, or this bird's wasn't vocal and now it's screaming all the time with no weight change and no training change. Well, why is it doing that? It's like, you got to troubleshoot. You got to think. You got to think of the abstract. And that book really helps you do that. So that's in my opinion, why Accipitrine Behavioral Problems is so valuable. Not for the information, but because of it teaches you how to think, how to look at an accipiter.
It's not perfect, but it can certainly point you in the right direction. And, it's written by people who have a ton of experience. So it's definitely something that can, if you have no experience and you don't have people around you who can coach you through things, it's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. So if you are looking to fly an accipiter and you're concerned that you're going to have a face grabbing bird, first and foremost, start with a family bird. That'll help you. Mm-hmm. It's just a leg up. Okay. The bird doesn't have some of the bad behavior, I'm not going to say bad behavioral problems, but the habits. Because as birds, if you think about it, when they transition from being cared for, which in falconry, they are being cared for, honestly. Mm. When they transition from being cared for to caring for themselves, they're going to generate certain habits that are going to help them to be successful in caring for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Well, not all of those habits, like, say, carrying their food off to a tree or dragging it into a bush, are conducive with being cared for. Yes. In falconry, we would prefer that they grab a hold of their prey and stay put with that, so that we can approach them and reward them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things of changing the behavior, changing changing the things that they learn to how you want them to do it. But with a family bird, some of those things were just never learned, so it's just a little bit more forgiving because you're not having to do quite so much to introduce them to this experience of being cared for.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're looking at the 3, the reason why the family bird situation is so much better. So the passage bird is a bird that's totally left its parents. It's off doing its thing. It's a first-year bird, but it's 100% in its own care. So it understands the value of food, but it also understands the value of cautiousness and of fear. And so you have a bird that is a experienced hunter. That's great. That gives you one leg up, but it's also afraid of everyone and everything. So that's a leg back. So usually passage birds will train fairly quickly, but there can be some aggression issues. Imprints, which are raised from babies, there is a point where the parents leave, and it's right at that point where the babies start to become extremely aggressive because their aggression is being directed at what was just dead stuff coming into the nest by mom and dad, and now it's like, oh, mom and dad will fly near the nest and drop a bird, and the babies chase after it and catch it, and the parents have to leave not long after that time, or else the babies will start literally attacking the parents. And so why that's so bad with humans is if you are raising from a baby, you're the parent, and you never leave, then the aggression issue is you have to be so spot on in channeling the aggression towards prey their entire time as a baby. Otherwise, it's going to come out and you're going to get aggression issues and vocal issues. And we're not going into the whole difference between a food imprint versus a social imprint. I just wanted to briefly say, look, here are the potential problems you can have with an imprint is vocalization and aggression, and they have no idea what hunting is. You have to make them into a hunter.
I had both of those. I had aggression and vocal. The vocal thing, I wasn't able to, completely eliminate it or anything, but by hunting, it was reduced. The aggression was a little bit more of a troubleshooting scenario where, I had to make sure that the bird didn't see me as the food source, that the food source was prey.
Yeah.
And that's because we were going through that same transition where they had just hard penned, and now they're like, hey mom, or hey dad, where's my food? And so that's a challenging part of it. And I think that a lot of that kind of stuff can be completely avoided by hacking.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the equipment to do it, if you have telemetry, I highly recommend hacking Imprint Accipiters, because boy,
I think that does the Imprint Accipitor 2 have, I think it has a chapter on that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. In fact, one of the stories told in that book talks about a pair of I believe they were Coopers, or they were Coopers that they had hacked out and were just amazing birds, and they would just keep them out during the day. It isn't like an overnight thing. They would just let them fly.
Yeah.
And at night they would come back. They would round them up and bring them inside, and they would sleep inside. And next morning, back out.
Yeah.
Chasing birds and everything like that. It's just, and maybe that even would help with, because it's a little bit, you would think that with an imprint, it would be easier to enter on game. Mm-hmm. So with kestrels, that is the case. So the difference, I think, is that with kestrels, you're trying to teach them to hunt something that they probably have never killed in the wild. More than likely, your passage kestrels never killed a starling.
Yeah.
We can probably guarantee that for 99% of the time, right? With the Coopers, your passage Coopers, it's killed a lot of starlings.
Uh-huh.
So it's really easy. With Zeke, for example, he got his first kill 2 days after his first free flight to the lure. Mm-hmm. Because I just took him out and showed him game. He never
like, yeah, I know what that stuff is. I've been killing that for a month.
Well, we had kind of prepped him, because the way that we do it, driving around, getting out, showing him the birds, all of that sort of thing. So we had already been going out and doing this with him. We would go out and do what we were going to do when we're hunting, and then we would stop at a place and do the lure or whatever. So he would get used to that activity of, okay, this is how we do it, right? Mm-hmm. So we just went out and did it, and this time he was free, and bam, he caught stuff. So that was easy. But with the imprint, it was a lot harder. Because the way that they do things is they bring in injured birds, or, the birds spend most of the day just chasing around the neighborhood LBJs, or little brown jobs. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's what Mike McDermott calls them in his book, is LBJs, little brown jobbers.
Yeah, that's what I call it, Twinkie bird.
Twinkie bird, LBJs,
little sparrow, right?
Sparrows, right? So, yeah, it's just a difference in the imprint from the family bird and passage birds. The family bird and passage birds, they were really easy to enter.
Yeah,
they already knew what food was. They already knew what it came from.
Family birds, in our opinion, are the most ideal situation. And if you go on this YouTube channel, I just did a video, I don't know, I think a couple weeks ago or something, about what a family bird is and why they're so good. That goes into more detail. But basically, these birds are being raised by their parents, and the parents start channeling their aggression towards game, that they're flying near the nest and they're dropping. And so the birds have left the nest, but they're in the grove of the nest. And they're wandering around, they're flying around, they're learning how to fly, they're learning how to chase, and they're still vocalizing, but their parents are in the process of leaving them. They're in the process of training them to hunt a wounded prey that they bring back, and in the process of abandoning them. So you show up and you trap a bird in that situation. The bird everything has been sequential. Oh, I lived with siblings. My parents fed me. Oh, then my parents brought me food and I had to tear it myself. Then I had to stand on the nest. Then I had to stand on branches near the nest. Then I had to learn how to fly and be the first to the wounded prey mom and dad brought. And now this human caught me. And now I'm going home and he's presenting me with food. And it's just a sequence that happens naturally. They know no different. They haven't really tasted the harshness of being an independent individual, but you didn't raise them from a baby, so even though you're giving food, you're not a parent.
Right.
And so you can...
You're just someone who's around all the time.
Yeah. And the parents started the work of focusing and channeling the aggression to wounded prey, and you just take that and continue it. You're like, yep, okay, we're going to find some prey for you to hunt. Here, go after it. So you picked up right where the parents left off, and you're just an addition to their life that takes them to places where there's quarry to hunt. And so it's the easiest way to have a Cooper's hawk that is fairly well behaved, fairly non-vocal, fairly non-aggressive if you do it right, and yet still easy to enter in on quarry and having success with hunting. So that's why we kind of view them as being the best choice if you have a choice on a Cooper's hawk.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that.
So just going back again over some of the fundamentals. Cooper's hawk, we don't think of it as a beginner's bird. I like Mike McDermott's phrase of calling them a feathered rattlesnake. They're not bad birds. They have aggression in them, but if you train them right, you can have tremendous success. And but again, it's a bird that I recommend you probably should keep inside for weight management reasons. It's a bird you need to you will have the most success if you have no other birds other than it, and hunt it every single day. Get out and make sure it's hunting every single day. And it's one of those birds where if you're not sure if you can commit the full amount of time, don't take the jump. Go get a sharp shin. Go get a Harris hawk. Go get something else.
Anything. It's just one of those things where I'd rather you go out and be successful with something than just becoming another story about how bad Coopers are, because they're not. They really aren't. It's just there's a lot of scenarios where people get them and maybe they didn't have the time to put into them. And then they have this bad experience, and I'd rather you not have a bad experience with them because they are really awesome birds.
They are. I think if we lived rural, if we were kind of back in more of the time of like farmland times and that kind of thing, of course then people were super busy too. But I just feel like if people had the time to commit, you'd see a lot more people flying Cooper's hawks because they're same thing. I mean, you could say the same thing with Ferrugi's, right? That's the biggest reason why people don't fly Ferrugi's is because they are extremely high maintenance for a Buteo. And it's the same thing with Coopers. It's like, go get a goshawk or a sharpshin. Even if you love Coopers, if you're iffy about the time commitment, go get a sharpshin and fly them. And a sharpshin is way more forgiving than a Cooper's by leaps and bounds. It's way more
kind of hard to find nowadays here.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing we've been noticing, huh?
Yeah. And, I think that I've got a good theory on that, and that is the fact that we've had a reduction in small bird populations. My personal theory is that has to do with the fact that we wipe out the population of the bird's food during breeding season, insects, right?
Yes.
But I'll leave that at that. The fact that we know that we've had a reduction in small birds, and Sharpies feed primarily on small birds. So these are your starlings, sparrows, finches, juncos, this kind of thing. That's what sharp-shinned hawks eat. They don't regularly in the wild venture into the dove quail territory, right? Or
Yeah.
Pigeons.
Coopers
They
will get a
can.
flicker, a jay, a dove, a
Right.
pigeon, the other stuff.
Grackles. That's the difference. That's the difference right there. Is that we've had a reduction in these things, but the granivores, and this is the reason that I think it's tied to insects, the granivores don't seem to be affected. We've had a massive explosion of collared doves. Why? They don't eat insects. They eat grains. They eat They're granivores. So the coopers, they don't care. They will eat anything they can get their claws on. So these collared doves, these Gambel's quail that we're seeing everywhere, also granivores. I'm sure that they do eat some insects too, but their flexibility is what is part of their success, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with the coopers. They are that perfect size where they can take more, and so the Sharpies and the coopers are just shifting, right? The coopers are being more prevalent here in the city because there just so happens to be more game that are suited for the coopers. And because the coopers are totally willing to take a small Twinkie bird too, that's why they're being
thriving.
more successful.
I really
They're
view 'em-
everywhere.
There's an American canine parallel that I see. I really do see it like goshawks are wolves, coopers are coyotes. There are coyotes, and Sharpies are the foxes. If you have a plummet in rodents, which could just be reduction of farm fields, then you stop seeing the foxes. If you have a reduction in large game that can be killed, every 5 days we need to kill a deer or a cow or a buffalo or whatever. The wolves, they can't handle those pressures. But the coyotes are like, I'll eat big stuff and small stuff. Oh, well, yeah, you turned my home into a city? Okay, I'll hunt big and small stuff in the city. And that's just like coopers. I mean, that's just
They'll
coopers
eat
and coyotes.
garbage.
The same way.
Like coyotes.
Yeah.
They're flexible.
And that's like coopers. How many were in that nest this last year?
7
babies
7 babies
in this Cooper's nest.
I've never seen one with 7 in it. I've seen 5.
Yeah, 4 or
the most
5
I've ever
is
seen.
good for a Cooper's.
Not saying somebody's going to tell us, oh, I saw 9 babies.
It's like, that's great. I believe
That's
you. There's
great.
always
I believe
exceptions.
you. But I've never seen 7. I've seen 5, I think, is the biggest. Even just in pictures, I've only seen 5.
I've been peeking in on Cooper's Nest for like over 25 years, and it's in Utah. It's 4 eggs typically, and most years it seems like 3 of the 4 hatch, and that was 7 eggs, 7 babies. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah,
And we're talking
all
2020. This video will be up for a long time. 2020, the crazy year with everywhere in the world on fire, and Utah in the middle of a drought, and here's this Cooper's Nest with 7 eggs. It's like they do so good. So they'll always be available, it seems, in falconry. Where Sharpies and Goss may be harder to come by, but those Coopers, they seem to thrive. So if you want to fly one, just do your homework, really research them. I've got several videos on the YouTube channel that go into Cooper's Hawks in much more depth, where to find their nests, how to train them, how to deal with aggression issues. That'll be helpful. And we will probably do more podcasts on Cooper's Hawks because we love them, and maybe we can go more in detail on the whole nesting thing.
Yes, this peregrine falcon lover loves Cooper's Hawks. I do. I really think that they're neat. It's been one of the most fun birds that I've ever flown. They're so full of energy and full of power, and despite some of the challenges, that is immensely fun to get to witness that.
Yeah.
I mean, I even saw situations where I'm flying this thing off the fist. I'm thinking that I need to look for things that are on the ground because, I'm a kestrel flyer a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And this bird will blew me away by just going and chasing birds in trees,
Yeah.
It's incredible.
They really are amazing to hunt with. And most people only get a chance to see little glimpses of them darting. Oh, they kill something for your bird feeder and whoom, and then disappear. And to actually hunt with one, it is nonstop.
Awesome
thrill. It's nonstop thrill. It's adrenaline. It's an extreme sport. They may not be big, but it doesn't matter. They're just incredible. So, Well, we're going a little over an hour here on this one, so I don't want to go too much longer. So we thank you all for tuning in again to the Falconry podcast. Let us know what else you'd like to hear in these podcasts, and also if you're falconers who have experience, we'd love to hear, just so we get kind of a benchmark of understanding. Are you seeing some lower numbers of Sharpies and goshawks in your states? We are in Utah.
Yeah. And what kind of area are you in? So see, that I'm curious to tie that to it, because there's not as much abatement of insects in rural areas. So where are you? Let us know where you are and whether you're seeing a reduction in Sharpies and an increase in Cooper's hawks.
Yeah, we'd love to know. And if you haven't already, hey, please hit subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow this podcast. And we'll have a podcast up for you next Monday. And as always, happy hawking.